Thinking of exiting your business or taking on a private equity partner to help you grow faster? BizNexus has you covered. Tap into our network of thousands of best-fit investors, acquirers, and proven M&A advisors, and we'll help you begin the relationship confidentially on your terms, your timeline. Learn more at biznexus.com.
Disclaimer from the always present legal team. Podcast conversations don't necessarily reflect the views of BizNexus Incorporated. Everything you hear is informational news and updates from around the industry. We're not recommending any investments. We're not offering any investment advice. Be sure to do your own homework.
Welcome back, everyone, to The Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be talking about making smart acquisitions, but not the kind that make headlines.
Right.
We're talking strategic, under-the-radar moves that can be real game changers for businesses, especially, companies in that lower middle market range that are listening.
Yeah.
And to guide us, we have some great insights from McKinsey and Company.
Yes.
Their research was led by Sophie Clark, Robert Ulaner, and Liz Wohl, and it lays out a framework called programmatic M&A, which is essentially like a blueprint for making acquisitions part of your growth strategy.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, when we think of M&A, we often picture these mega mergers, the ones that shake up entire industries. But, McKinsey's research suggests there's a different path, one that's particularly relevant, I think, to companies in the lower middle market.
Yeah.
It's not about making, that big splash. It's about consistently making smart strategic acquisitions over time to really transform your business.
So not chasing the flashy deals, but building a solid foundation for long-term growth. And that's where this M&A blueprint comes into play.
Yeah.
So tell me more about that.
Absolutely. So think of the blueprint as your roadmap for acquisitions.
Okay.
It really helps you define the why, the where, and the how of your M&A strategy.
Right.
And make sure that every move you make aligns with your overall business goals.
Okay, so let's break that down, starting with the why. What questions should companies be asking themselves at this stage?
Yeah, so it really starts with a deep dive into your own business, right?
Uh-huh.
So what are your core strengths? Where are the gaps?
Yeah.
And crucially, what are your long-term ambitions?
Yeah.
What do you want your company to look like in 5, 10 years down the line?
So aligning your acquisitions with a bigger vision, not just filling an immediate need.
Precisely. And once you have a solid understanding of your why, you can move on to the where.
Okay.
And this is about pinpointing the specific areas or themes where acquisitions can have the biggest impact. So, for example, are you looking to expand geographically, enter new markets, acquire new capabilities or technologies?
Yeah.
This stage is all about identifying those sweet spots where M&A can really accelerate your growth.
Like narrowing down your shopping list to the items. That'll make a real difference.
Yeah.
But how do you actually find these opportunities, especially for companies in the lower middle market who might not have huge teams dedicated to, scouring the globe for potential targets?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is where things get really interesting for businesses like our listeners. It's about leveraging your existing networks and knowledge.
Okay.
You might not have, a team of analysts scouring the globe,
Right.
but you likely have a deep understanding of your industry and the players within it.
Yeah.
So really using that insider advantage to identify those hidden gems that might fly under the radar of bigger firms.
So it's like having a secret weapon in the M&A game.
Exactly. Think about it. You're already plugged into industry events. You're talking to suppliers and distributors. You're reading trade publications. Yeah. All of that gives you valuable intel that can inform your M&A strategy.
Okay, so we found our target. How do we determine if it's the right fit?
That's where due diligence comes in. And this is an area where having a clear M&A blueprint can be a real game changer.
Yeah.
It ensures that you're not just evaluating a company in isolation, but you're assessing how it aligns with your overall strategy.
So looking beyond the financials and considering the strategic fit.
Absolutely. Does this acquisition complement your existing strengths?
Right.
Does it fill a critical gap? Will it help you achieve those long-term ambitions that we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
These are the questions that should be guiding your due diligence process.
I'm like putting together a puzzle, making sure each piece fits perfectly into that bigger picture.
Exactly.
And once you've completed that due diligence and decided to move forward, but that brings us to the how part of the blueprint, right?
You got
the actual integration of the acquired company.
And this is where things can get really tricky, especially for companies in the lower middle market who might not have, dedicated integration teams.
Right.
McKinsey's research really emphasizes the importance of having a clear integration plan in place before the deal even closes.
Okay.
This is about anticipating those potential roadblocks, whether it's cultural differences, technological discrepancies, or even leadership transitions,
right,
and developing strategies to address them proactively.
So it's like having a playbook for the entire integration process from day one onward.
Exactly.
But how detailed does this plan need to be? What are some of the key elements it should include?
It should cover all the critical aspects of bringing two companies together, from aligning operational processes to merging IT systems to communicating with employees.
Yeah.
It should also address those more nuanced aspects of integration, like cultural alignment and leadership transitions.
So not just the nuts and bolts, but also the human element.
Right, and this is where having a clear why comes back into play. When employees understand the strategic rationale behind the acquisition, when they see how it fits into the bigger picture, they're more likely to embrace the change and contribute to a successful integration.
Creating that shared sense of purpose and excitement about the future.
Exactly. And that's one of the key advantages of having a well-defined M&A blueprint.
Yeah?
It helps you communicate a compelling story to all stakeholders, both inside and outside the company.
Because ultimately, M&A is about storytelling.
Yeah.
It's about creating a narrative that resonates with your team, your investors, even your customers. It's about showing them where you're going and why they should be excited to be a part of the journey.
Well said. And for companies in the lower middle market, this storytelling aspect can be even more crucial.
Yeah.
It can help you attract talent, secure funding, and even gain a competitive advantage in the market.
So it's not just about buying companies, it's about building a future.
Exactly.
And that brings us to a fascinating case study highlighted in the McKinsey article.
Yeah.
They talk about a U.S. healthcare company that spent over a decade and billions of dollars building out their services business through very carefully chosen acquisitions.
Yes. This healthcare company serves as a powerful example of programmatic M&A in action. Even though, they're operating on a much larger scale than what we're focusing on today, what's important here is they had 3 key M&A themes that guided their decisions over that decade.
Yeah.
And they stuck to those themes, relentlessly pursuing acquisitions that fit within those parameters.
That's commitment.
Right.
And it sounds like it paid off for them, but what does that look like on a smaller scale?
Right.
How can companies in that lower middle market apply these principles to achieve similar success?
It's all about adapting the principles to your unique context.
Okay.
So for a company in the lower middle market, those themes might be more narrowly focused and the acquisitions themselves might be smaller in size.
Right.
But the core principle remains the same. Make every acquisition count.
So even if you're not dropping billions on deals, that same strategic thinking applies.
Exactly.
You need a clear vision. You need that focused approach.
Yeah.
And a commitment to making those acquisitions work for you.
Absolutely. And I think that's a perfect segue to our next discussion, where we'll delve into the nitty-gritty of adapting this M&A blueprint to the specific needs and challenges of companies in the lower middle market.
Sounds like we're ready to take the plunge.
Let's do it. All right, so let's get specific. Imagine you're the CEO of, say, a regional craft brewery.
Okay.
You're doing well, but you've hit a growth ceiling.
Okay.
Programmatic M&A might be the answer, but it has to be tailored to your world.
Perfect example. So our craft brewery CEO, they're not going to be snapping up, national distributors or anything.
Right.
Their ware is going to be much more localized.
Exactly. They might consider acquiring a local chain of pubs to control distribution, or maybe a smaller brewery with a unique brewing process that they admire.
Right.
It's about finding those strategic gems that fit their market and enhance their existing strengths.
It's almost like a hyper-local version of the healthcare giant's 3 M&A themes.
Precisely.
We were discussing earlier. They're thinking smaller, but with that same strategic focus.
Yeah, and this is where that deep industry knowledge comes in.
Right.
Our brewery CEO likely knows which pubs are struggling.
Yeah.
Or which up-and-coming brewers might be open to acquisition.
Right.
That local intel is invaluable.
Okay, so we found our targets. But due diligence on a smaller scale, does it follow the same principles?
Yeah.
It can't be as complex as, these billion-dollar deals.
It's definitely less complex, but the core principles still apply.
Okay.
You're still assessing financial health, legal compliance, all of that.
Right.
But for a craft brewery, the focus might shift.
How so?
Well, cultural fit becomes huge.
Okay.
Imagine acquiring a brewery known for its edgy experimental beers,
Yep.
only to discover their staff clashes completely with your more traditional team. That's a recipe for disaster.
So due diligence becomes less about spreadsheets and more about, understanding people and how these companies will mesh together.
Exactly. And this is where that M&A blueprint proves its worth yet again by defining your why so clearly up front. You can assess whether a potential acquisition truly aligns with your company culture and values,
Right.
not just your financial goals.
So it's like a cultural compatibility test
Exactly.
built right into your strategy.
Yeah.
Love it. But let's be honest. Integration on a smaller scale can still be a huge headache, even with the best blueprint. Any advice for our brewery CEO on navigating that tricky phase?
Communication is key, especially when you're dealing with smaller teams who are used to a certain way of doing things.
Yeah.
Be upfront about the changes, address concerns directly, and involve employees from both sides in the process.
Okay.
It's amazing how often simple transparency can really smooth out those integration bumps.
Makes sense. It's all about creating that sense of ownership and shared purpose.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of celebrating wins along the way. Did you successfully merge your brewing processes? Great. Throw a party. Acknowledge the team's hard work.
Okay.
Those small gestures can go a long way in building morale and solidifying that new combined company culture.
So we've talked about how to adapt the why, the where, and the how of the M&A blueprint for companies in the lower middle market.
Right.
But there's one more crucial element that we haven't touched on yet,
Yeah.
and that's the storytelling aspect.
Yeah.
Why is that so important, particularly for smaller companies?
Think about it. If you're a regional craft brewery, acquiring another brewery down the road might not make national news.
Right.
But it's huge for your local community, your employees, your loyal customers.
So how do you turn that into a story that resonates?
Lean into your authenticity.
Yeah.
Don't try to mimic the language of those big corporate mergers.
Yeah.
Talk about the shared passion for craft brewing, the commitment to your community, the excitement of bringing new beers to your customers.
So it's about tapping into the emotional core of why you're doing this, rather than just focusing on the financial or strategic aspects.
Precisely. And this narrative is not just for external communication.
Right,
it's
yeah.
for your employees, too.
Yeah.
Help them understand why this acquisition is good for them, how it creates opportunities for growth, new skills, even just being part of something bigger.
It's about making everyone feel like they're part of a winning team.
Yeah.
A team that's creating something special together.
And when you can do that, when you can create that sense of shared purpose and excitement, that's when programmatic M&A truly becomes a transformative force,
Yeah.
not just a business transaction.
Powerful stuff. But before we get too carried away with all this talk of transformation and storytelling, let's bring it back to reality for a moment.
What do you mean?
Well, we've been painting a pretty rosy picture of programmatic M&A,
Yeah,
but we have to acknowledge that it's not always a smooth ride.
right.
There are risks, challenges, and yes, even failures along the way.
Of course.
And I think it's important for our listeners to understand those potential pitfalls before they dive headfirst into the M&A world.
You're absolutely right. Let's talk about some of those potential challenges and what our brewery CEO or any leader in the lower middle market can do to mitigate those risks.
Okay, so we've talked about the blueprint, the importance of that cultural fit, crafting that, compelling narrative. But what about when things go wrong?
Yeah.
I imagine even the best laid M&A plans, can hit some snags.
Oh, absolutely. And, it's especially important for companies in the lower middle market to be aware of these potential pitfalls because they often have, less margin for error. One common mistake is overpaying for an acquisition.
Right.
Getting caught up in the excitement of a deal and not properly assessing the true value.
It's like impulse buying, but on a business scale.
Exactly. And the consequences can be much more severe.
Yeah, for sure. Another pitfall is neglecting the integration process.
Right.
It's easy to get so focused on, the thrill of the deal, but the real work begins after the ink is dry.
Yeah.
If you don't carefully plan and execute that integration, you can end up with a Frankenstein's monster of a company with clashing cultures, incompatible systems, and a whole lot of frustrated employees.
Yeah, it's like stitching together pieces that don't quite fit and the seams start to show pretty quickly.
Yeah. And speaking of seams, let's not forget about the potential for legal and regulatory issues.
Oh, right.
Even seemingly small acquisitions can trigger regulatory scrutiny, especially in industries with, strict compliance requirements.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So it's not just about dotting your I's and crossing your It's about navigating this complex web of regulations. Any advice for our listeners on how to avoid these legal landmines?
Well, due diligence is crucial, of course, but it's also important to have a good legal team on your side.
Yeah.
One that understands the intricacies of M&A transactions and can really guide you through that process.
So it's like having a seasoned Sherpa, guiding you through these treacherous mountain passes of the legal landscape.
That's a great analogy. And speaking of guides, I think it's worth emphasizing that, even with the best planning and preparation, programmatic M&A is a journey.
Yeah.
It's not a destination. There will be bumps along the way, unexpected challenges and moments where you have to adjust course.
So it's not about having all the answers up front, but about being adaptable and responsive to that ever-changing landscape.
Yeah, and that's where having a strong leadership team, one that's committed to the long-term vision and can really navigate those inevitable twists and turns, that becomes absolutely essential.
It's like having a skilled captain at the helm, able to steer the ship through those choppy waters and keep it on course towards that ultimate destination.
Yeah.
Which is, of course, a more resilient, adaptable, and ultimately more valuable business.
Well said. And remember, even if you're not currently considering any acquisitions, the principles of programmatic M&A can still be applied to other areas of your business.
Like what?
Think about strategic partnerships, joint ventures, even internal reorganizations. The same principles of careful planning, clear communication, and a focus on cultural alignment can make all the difference in ensuring success.
So it's a mindset, a way of approaching growth and change in a strategic and intentional way.
Exactly. And that's a powerful takeaway for any leader, regardless of their industry or company size.
Absolutely. Huge thanks to McKinsey and Company.
Yes.
And specifically Sophie Clark, Robert Ulaner, and Liz Wool for their insightful research on this topic.
Yeah.
It's given us and hopefully our listeners a lot to think about.
It's been a pleasure diving deep with you.
And to our amazing listeners, we hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the world of programmatic M&A. Remember, it's not just about buying companies, it's about building a future. So go out there, create your blueprint, and start building.
And be sure to check out the show notes for a link to that full McKinsey article.
Yeah, great point.
It's packed with even more insights and examples that we couldn't cover in our deep dive.
And as always, if you have a topic you'd love to see us tackle in a future deep dive, we're all ears. Hit us up on social media or shoot us an email. We love hearing from you. Until then, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep those acquisitions strategic.
Acquiring a business? BizNexus simplifies it. Access thousands of updated opportunities in our DIY marketplace or supercharge team sourcing with OmniSource, your all-in-one platform for on-market, off-market, and coming-soon deals. Scale smarter today. Learn more or book a demo at www.biznexus.com.